The following program is intended for a mature listening audience. Graphic and explicit language may be heard at times. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual hosts and their guests do not necessarily express those of this station or sponsors. Listeners are advised that neither this station nor its owners and agents shall be held liable for the content of this program. Rebroadcast, redistributed or reused without express written permission by host or producer is not allowed.
Hello and welcome to Cafe Enigma Radio. Tonight we're going to be talking about CERN, time travel, probably some string theory and some other great and fascinating things out there. We have with us tonight, besides myself, Jane Rodriguez, my sidekick, as well as William Mike Mott and Lon Strickler. First time for both of these excellent guys, but it's really great to have you guys aboard with us as we talk about and discuss about some of these topics. So, along with that, how are you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing great.
All right. Jane, are you there yet?
I'm here. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come join us. I know some of this invitation was a little last minute for some of you, but everyone should know who you are if they do any modicum of research into anomalies or creatures that are involved with folklore and such. So just thank you. And of course, Lon, you have that Phantoms and Monsters, which is very popular.
It's a resource.
Yeah, keeps me busy. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, Lon, how many years have you been doing that now?
Be 10 years this year.
Yeah, it's been a while. And really, it was one of the first sites of its kind, as I recall, that really was sort of comprehensive. Yeah.
I had a couple people talk me into doing it, and I was actually writing for a local blog, and I had a couple other people who were friends of mine said, you're writing all this stuff, you're doing investigations, why don't you just put it on a blog? So, and blogging was starting to get big then, so that's what I decided to do, and it kind of swelled from there.
Yeah, definitely a great site.
And William Michael Mott, I can call you Michael, is that what you prefer?
Yeah, you can call me Mike.
Oh, okay, great. How long have you been doing this for? Now, what was your first book, and how did you get started?
Well, I've got several books out. Some are fiction, some are nonfiction. The nonfiction books tend to lean in the direction of Fortean research, but I've been writing for a long time. But for some reason, the book that seems to be the most popular is Caverns, Cauldrons, and Concealed Creatures, which is now in a third expanded edition. And honestly, I'm fighting doing a fourth edition. I'm just thinking about doing a whole new book because it's just, as Lon knows, every time you think you've nailed some stuff down, here comes a whole bunch of new stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's as if some of these things intentionally attempt or try very hard to avoid being nailed down. So it's a constant, ever expanding field, and I think that as we talked about before the show, and as I do mention in Caverns, Cauldrons, and Concealed Creatures, I think that really what we're all looking at here is, with all this stuff, is folklore, and this is all an ongoing update of folklore. Just like Billy the Kid and Jesse James are now part of folklore, that doesn't mean they weren't real. Okay, so what we see is we see this ongoing game that seems to be being played with humanity, and we deal with it through folklore. That otherwise we wouldn't be able to function if we, if some of these things were actually, if the majority of people understood that these things were real, some people would not be able to get up and go to work. Let's just face it. So, the folklore process, I think, is sort of a release valve and a protective mechanism for our collective psyche.
Softens the blow, maybe a little bit?
I think so. And you see Bigfoot, selling beef jerky and leprechauns on cereal boxes and stuff. So it doesn't show you the really terrifying aspects that go with those phenomena.
Right.
But that's how we deal with things like that. That's how we've always dealt with things like that. So I think that my only concern, and this is one of the things I like about Lon, for instance, in his research, he doesn't do this. I try not to do this. But there are people out there that put themselves in the folklore. They're not satisfied, even if they have anomalous experiences and they do investigations, that's fine. But there are people out there that seem to just come up with these elaborate stories that they can never show any evidence for, and they create this persona and put themselves in the folklore or try to become part of it. And to me, that's a disservice to finding out what's really going on.
Because it's not any way, shape, or form scientific in its approach.
Right, it's not objective.
No.
And even if you have an experience, you can still try to be as objective as possible about how you interpret that experience.
Sure. Have you yourself had any experiences that...
Oh, sure. But, I don't talk about those much. And the reason is, for that very reason, you don't want somebody to come to you and say, well, you said this happened to you, therefore you're just a nut. Well, no.
Right.
I'm not even going to talk about what happened with me. Actually, I have a few times, and I have actually put it in print a few times, but for the most part, no, because you want to be as objective as possible. So when you're looking for patterns, correlations, things like this between different types of data, and even different cases, you have to kind of not put yourself in it, if that makes sense.
Yes, we're talking tonight about the theme of portals and stargates, dimensions. David Paulides, his research, you mentioned if these things got out to the public and the mass media, people would be afraid to go to work. And I think that story that he's written about, 4 books now,
Right.
If people really grasped what was going on, what he was writing about, these are real cases now, and those are investigated by real policemen, real park rangers, and the evidence just leads you to a mysterious conclusion because there are no tracks, there are no blood spray, there's nothing.
Exactly. People just disappear. And if you go back, like I said, that's like Caverns is now in the 3rd edition, but in the 1st edition, and of course in every subsequent edition, I talk about the missing person statistics from, I think it was 1995, and these came from, the various law enforcement agencies. And there are just too many people disappearing every year in the United States alone. Okay, now here we are, we're the most advanced nation, supposedly, in the history of the world on the planet. We have cops and we have technology and all this kind of stuff to keep track of things.
Surveillance cameras, drones,
But we still have people disappearing in alarming numbers. And you think about, that's not just in the wilderness areas, that's in the cities too. So you think about a certain percentage of those people are going to be explained away as runaways, people trying to lose themselves, change their identity, maybe a small number of people who have amnesia. They're going to be people who are victims of foul play. These types of things. I mean, that happens. But even when you take those numbers into consideration, you're still left with a sizable number, approximately around 2,200 people a day in the United States who disappear and are never found again.
What's particularly interesting is when some of these bodies are recovered in the urban areas, particularly they're found in rivers and such. They're recovered, say somebody has gone missing, and it's always young men that are in between, ages 19 and 25 or 6, college age, fit, athletic men. They're found in a river dead. And the forensics comes back that they have been dead for only 5 days, but missing for 20 days.
Right. Well, it's kind of like what David Paulides talks about with them people being found, and their clothes look like they're, that like their shoes aren't even dirty, things like that. I mean,
Right.
There's something definitely going on, and if you go back in history, it's always gone on. There's nothing new to it. Our folklore, again, I think it also serves the purpose of trying to warn us. It gives us an avenue to warn younger people or naive people that yes, there are monsters. Whatever is going on, something is happening to people. Okay, and this is nothing new. We're just becoming more aware of it because of our technology, our communication abilities, and if you think about 2,200 people a day in the United States disappearing, approximately, and those are the ones that disappear, and no one ever finds out what happened to them. Okay, they don't find them. Okay, all right. What's going on in the third world?
Oh yeah, right. Where there's no strict record keeping and same level of technology.
Exactly. And see, if this type of thing were happening with, for instance, a warfare or a disease or some other, social ill, the outcry would be tremendous. I mean, it would be all over the news and people would be protesting. See what I'm saying?
Right.
So why is this thing sort of just shoved to the back and nobody talks about it? Because really they don't.
Well, I mean, why do they hide the skulls? Why did the Smithsonian dump them into the ocean? Why don't they discuss these things? There's a lot of...
Exactly.
This case,
Well, you have to assume that you have one of two answers. You either have, and it could be both, either they know
right.
and they're powerless to do anything about it and they want to avoid, panic and upheaval, or to some extent, somebody in the know is involved.
Right.
Or
Those
at
are the only
least,
two.
yeah, or at least complicit in some way,
Yes.
allowing it to happen. So these are the things that you're not going to hear people talking about on Dateline BBC.
Right. No, never. And yet, like you said, the numbers are so high. If people had any idea, if they had any idea at all, they would, Yosemite.
But you know what they'll do, Jane? They'll even if you tell them and you show them the statistics, the actual statistics, it'll go in one ear and out the other. They'll just say, well, that's really weird, and that sounds like some conspiracy stuff, and I'm going to go watch Hungry Housewives and Dancing with the Morons. Don't tell me about this anymore. You're crazy. That's the attitude.
Oh, no. Yeah,
but that's part of the conditioning that it's the same thing as being conditioned to see Sasquatch as a big friendly monkey man and conditioned to think of leprechauns as happy little people, when actually, if you're Irish, that you make a leprechaun angry and it becomes something called a chloricon, and it's not real friendly when that happens. So people don't know, and I don't know if they really want to know to some extent.
Exactly.
I'm going to jump in here real quick before
Sure.
we take and get going too far down the rabbit hole, because I like to keep the show more or less the same way almost every week. So I'm going to play the clip from In Search Of, and then when we come back, we'll pick up where we left off and add to anything new that we found out about that and the information from that clip. All right? We'll be right back after this.
The book ushered in a fanciful era of imaginary trips to awe-inspiring events of history. '79 AD, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. '26 AD, the resurrection of Christ. '15 billion BC, the very creation of the universe. Today, science is reshaping our concept of the cosmos. Are we at last ready to journey to the stars and conquer the barriers of time and space travel?
This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanations, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
We are witness to the last leg of a hypothetical journey to the stars and back again. Our crew has been traveling through the galaxy very near the speed of light. They have finally returned to Earth. Due to an effect called time dilation, first described by Albert Einstein, hundreds of years have passed on Earth, while only a few years have passed in the spaceship. Once they have landed, what will the crew find when they open the portal of their ship? Will Earth have reached undreamed heights of technology, or seared itself back into Stone Age emptiness? It is easy to conceive of the astronauts' journey through space. It is harder to comprehend their travel through time.
How far-fetched is the idea of actually traveling through time? Today, we accept the concept of distant space travel because we have journeyed to the moon and back. Now, scientists are preparing for a world where both time and space travel are inseparably linked.
Status check. Command on intel? Affirmative.
One expert on the subject of time and space is William Kaufman, author, lecturer, and adjunct professor in the Department of Physics at San Diego State University.
We all live in space and time. We're all familiar with the three dimensions of space, forward and back, left and right, up and down. And time is what clocks measure. As the clock ticks on, it's measuring time. And of course, as we go from the cradle to the grave, you're also moving through time. It's kind of like looking up at the stars. When you look up at the stars during the night, you see stars scattered across the sky. If you think about what you're seeing, if you look at a star that's 10 light years away, you're really seeing how that star looked 10 years ago because it took the light 10 years to get to you. And therefore, to me, one of the great lessons of the nighttime sky is that as we are looking out into space, we're also looking backwards in time. That we must incorporate time on an equal footing with our three dimensions of space and talk about something that we call space-time, one of the things that was given to us by Albert Einstein.
Albert Einstein changed all conventional thinking in physics when he published his famous theory of relativity in 1905.
E is equal mc square, in which energy is put equal to mass multiplied with the square of the velocity of light, showed that very small amount of mass may be converted into a very large amount of energy.
Albert Einstein approached all of reality with a deep personal conviction, almost a religious belief, that if we're doing anything right in science, if we're discovering anything of any real value, then the way we write down our discoveries, the way we write down our equations, should not depend on things like the color of your skin or your religion or how fast you happen to be moving, whether you're sitting here on the Earth or zooming through the solar system at 3/4 the speed of light. And all Einstein did in 1905 was take everything we knew about electricity and magnetism and rewrite it in a form such that it would be the same for everyone. For an example, suppose you have a rocket ship moving through the solar system at 3/4 the speed of light. In order for you on Earth and your colleague in that spaceship to have a complete, coherent, rational understanding of how things work, you have to say his rulers are shrinking. You have to say that the very mass of his spaceship is behaving as though it's much more massive than it normally is. You have to say his clocks are ticking more slowly than normal. Not only do the clocks tick more slowly, but every process proceeds more slowly, like the rate at which a man's beard grows, or the rate at which your heart beats, or even the rate at which you age. One of the results of all of this is that you can't travel faster than the speed of light. And the reason why this is so is if you think about moving out in a rocket ship, say a rocket ship even with an infinite supply of fuel, as that rocket ship goes faster and faster and faster, its clocks slow down. And as a result, it burns that fuel more and more slowly. And the slowing down of time is so powerful that at the speed of light, clocks stop, time stops. And as a result, you never are able to burn that final drop of fuel, that final precious drop of fuel that would put you over the speed of light. While Albert Einstein was exploring many of the hypothetical and mathematical aspects of space and time, people in the United States and in Germany were actually building machines to take us up off of the surface of the Earth.
Early experiments in rocketry appear almost comic compared to today's accomplishments in space. But improvements in rocket design came rapidly, especially in America under Robert Goddard, and in Germany with the work of Wernher von Braun. By 1932, von Braun had taken charge of Germany's rocket program and had begun the tests that would lead to the infamous V-2 missiles. During World War II, Adolf Hitler used the V-2 rocket as a weapon of terror against the civilian population of London.
For better or for worse, rockets have always had a military application. But underlying all of this, in the minds of everyone who works on these projects, is the vision of using these machines to take us beyond the confines of our own planet, to explore the moon. We've walked on the lunar surface, to use reusable rocket ships like the space shuttle, to make many trips, to make use of the full potential of what actually exists out there in space. And you know, perhaps not us, but our children may very well be able to book flights to space stations or to the moon and beyond.
One group that hopes to be among the first to utilize the space shuttle when it opens up to civilians calls itself Oasis. They gather together on weekends to share food and their enthusiasm for space travel.
I'm Charlie Carr, and I'm with the California Museum of Science and Industries. This group is doing something that's really unique. It's getting together a lot of people from different backgrounds, from technical fields, from social fields, people working in the community, all different sorts of people, and they're all thinking and talking about space. They're talking about what's going to happen in the future, talking about what's going to happen personally to their lives as more people on Earth move out into space.
A frequent lecturer to the group is Dr. B.J. Bluth, sociologist and expert on long-duration space flight.
The work that I do really focuses in on how people can live in space, how they can get along together, what kinds of general problems, stresses, factors make it easier and harder for them to have a viable, successful mission. The human is going to have certain kinds of problems when he goes to space. There are stresses, there are physiological problems, there are fears, there are incidents that occur, there's the interpersonal relationship, there's being holed up all alone, no place to go, no way to get away. If you can imagine yourself being in a camper with no privacy curtains, with another person for 6 months and no place to go and you can't walk out of the camper, what kinds of things happen in that kind of situation? We have a very human problem in going to space. The technology is only one aspect. And if the human part of this space travel isn't as carefully solved as the technology problem, all of the technology in the world isn't going to make it possible to do what we want to do.
Obviously, there are a lot of technical problems with space travel. It's a difficult business getting someone there and back and healthy and sane during the process. But there's another whole aspect to this business. Because sitting around in the scientific journals for the past 15 or 20 years now have been things like time machines and time tunnels, wormholes in space, highly warped regions of space where you could go in someplace in our universe and come out in another universe, or go in one of these holes and come out back in our own universe at a different time, 1 billion years ago or 1 billion years in the future. And these are some of the most fantastic, hypothetical things that science has ever given us.
In our future explorations of the galaxy, will we one day make the discovery that will fulfill H.G. Wells' dream of time travel? Will we find the mechanism to travel backwards and forwards through time? I am afraid I cannot convey the peculiar sensations of time traveling. There is a feeling of helpless, headlong motion. As I put on pace, night followed day like the flapping of a black wing. So wrote H.G. Wells in 1895 in his incredible novel, The Time Machine. Wells described a machine of brass, ebony, ivory, and translucent glimmering quartz. It was designed to take man on a journey through time. Wells clearly understood the implication of traveling backwards and forwards through the centuries and depicted it as a wonderful adventure. In an effort to accurately predict the future, H.G. Wells strove to utilize the latest scientific theories of his day. A strong proponent of the theory of evolution, Wells suggested that the environment of industrialized England would cause the factory workers to evolve into what he called Morlocks. The Morlocks were pale, pink-eyed, carnivorous creatures who inhabited underground caverns of complex machinery. Wells saw a different fate for those who lived the life of leisure in society. After thousands of years of living without need or conflict, Wells proposed that they would evolve into what he called the Eloi. The Eloi were childlike creatures of limited intelligence who would frolic and gather fruit on the surface of the earth. Today, the evolutionary prophecies of H.G. Wells seem to many unlikely. But is it possible that someday science may actually build a time machine?
Having a time machine is a very attractive idea. We all have things we'd like to go back and change about our lives or maybe affect history somehow. But scientists have trouble with time machines. There are a lot of illogical inconsistencies that develop. For example, if you had a time machine that could take you back 1 billion years in the past, well, then you should certainly have no difficulty going 5 minutes back into the past. And if you could go back 5 minutes, you could meet yourself and tell yourself, literally, what kind of a nice trip you had. And then both of you could do the same thing. And then all 4 of you could do it. And then all 8 of you could do it. In other words, there's an inherent inconsistency that suddenly comes up. If you could travel back into the past, then reality must be irrational. There must be a very irrational part to how the universe works. And we don't see this going on around us. And for this reason, when scientists find time machines popping up in their calculations, a lot of flags go up and they begin suspecting that they've done something wrong.
If there is any chance of a time travel mechanism existing, it will probably be found in distant space. Some scientists believe that when a giant red star explodes, the remaining core may collapse down to an incredibly dense ball of matter called a black hole. The gravitational field around a black hole is so intense that not even light can escape it.
The full description of how black holes work also include white holes. The full description actually is a set of black holes and white holes back to back. What's a black hole for one universe where things fall in is a white hole in the next universe where stuff gushes out. But the interesting thing in all of these pictures where you have a black hole, white hole situation is that if you take into account the effects of rotation on the black hole, the entire structure inside the black hole change. In particular, one of the things to come out of this, theoretically, is that you could possibly use this black hole as a portal, as a time tunnel from our universe to some future universe, or perhaps even some past universe.
Such a journey into a black hole would be fraught with dangers.
If you can go through that wormhole in space and time, then you can travel very, very near the center of the hole. You can travel very near where the matter of the star collapsed down to, where you have this tremendous curvature, this high warping of space and time. And there are problems with that. For example, if you could travel very near that place where you have infinite space-time warping, according to Einstein's famous equation E equals mc squared, the energy in the gravitational field of the hole produces a lot of matter that fills up the wormhole and chokes off any possibility of space travel to future universes. And this is one of the ways in which we think nature prohibits time machines. Nature takes care of things and makes sure that things won't come out too irrational by having a time machine. It chokes off the possibility of getting through the wormhole.
Perhaps the tunnel through a black hole will forever remain blocked, but the possibility always remains that someday someone will make a discovery which will allow us to visit Earth's distant past or glittering future. Carol Amato has a background in social science and is a member of OASIS. She has a special plan for accomplishing her goal of space travel.
I use the computer in my work, and I'm hoping that by doing so, this will provide a career path for me to get into space. My children I'm trying to prepare just by being adaptive to new situations. Tracy has a tremendous interest in growing things, plants and baby animals. I'm hoping she'll take this interest into space because it's going to be necessary to want to nurture things in order to make the environment be a psychologically pleasing one and to recreate something of the Earth. Damon's a very active boy. I hope he can utilize that energy that he has in some constructive way. Maybe he can go into space and become one of the pioneers.
With the successful flight of the space shuttle and the likelihood of civilian space travel on the horizon, it is not difficult to imagine families like Carol Amato's someday traveling into space. Perhaps one day, a boy Damon's age will solve the mystery of what lies on the other side of a black hole or at the place beyond the stars. What are the limitations of the galaxy? Will we ever travel faster than the speed of light, or backward and forward through time?
I don't think that any scientist would categorically say, no, we will never travel faster than the speed of light. No, we'll never have time travel. But if we ever do, then this would have to come from a whole new view of science, a new super science, whereby we understand today's limitations as one separate little case. In other words, the kind of science that would give us travel into the past or travel faster than the speed of light would be as advanced over us today as we are over Neanderthal man.
You've just listened to In Search of, hosted by Leonard Nimoy. This In Search of was titled Time and Space Travel. It first aired January 24th, 1982. It came from Season 6, Episode 19. Hello and welcome back to Cafe Enigma Radio. There we go. Hey, here we go. Yeah, we're all back now.
Mark, you're there?
Yeah, finally. Welcome in, David. We have with us tonight Jane Rodriguez, my sidekick in arms, Lon Strickler, William Mike Mott, we call him Mike, and we have David Campione. And David, where you been? I mean, did they beam you up on a saucer or something? It's been.
I just got. We had so many trees. We were ready to bisect the house, and I just had to get out with my. I couldn't afford $1,000 tree, so I had to get out my big 5-horsepower saw, and I've been cutting and hauling trees and having computer problems also, which I think I emailed you that one. It was a nightmare last year. I don't know what the heck happened.
I don't know, but if you got the trees cleared enough, I'm sure that they'll be able to beam you up easier.
Well, maybe that's why I had to take them down.
Okay.
I don't have to drive anywhere.
All right, now that we have everybody back, all right, and the confusion is over, let's get back to talking about time travel, CERN, and some weird and wacky things that go on over there that they're playing around with. Okay?
Yes.
So I'm going to turn this over to Jane because I'm losing my voice.
Oh, no.
Well, hello.
So you go, girl.
Hey, CERN is a big deal. It's the biggest machine on the planet right now.
Right.
And scientists have said that they don't know exactly what's going to happen when they try to open up a black hole and send gravitons over to the other side and attempt communicating with the quote-unquote other side. Their stated mission, one of them is to try to recreate the God particle and see what happened when God spoke the universe into existence and how to undo it. So this relates to the Shiva statue that they have in front of the building itself at CERN. And if this isn't alarming enough, I mean, there's a lot of quote-unquote coincidences that revolve around CERN, including the fact that a lot of the territory that it's built on is built upon an ancient Apollyon. I don't know how to describe it, where they used to do, rites and stuff. So this all relates to one another. Stephen Hawking, people compare him to Einstein. Has said that this could pose a severe, grave danger for the universe as it can unravel the universe.
Well, if you go back and look, I've been commenting on CERN-concerned websites since 2008, and Micah Hanks actually interviewed me actually quoted me after an email interview on Mysterious Universe website in March of 2011. And I also, in the third edition of Caverns, Cauldrons, and Concealed Creatures, I did a pretty extensive look at this, and with the whole Shiva thing and everything else that's going on here. And we've basically been fed a pile of horse manure with the story behind this thing. We're told that it's all in the interest of science and so forth, but there's something else going on. These people know the dangers that they're playing with, and they don't care. I didn't get a vote. I don't think your 3-year-old got a vote, Jane.
No.
You know, it's one of those things where they know that, for instance, okay, they had a lot of very, what's the word? There's sort of smarmy quips they used to give in press conferences in 2007, 2008.
Smartass.
Yeah, people were expressing concerns, and they would have little comments that they thought were clever, like, "Well, we don't think that the odds of destroying the Earth is it's about the same as winning the lottery 3 times in a row." Ha ha ha. Well, there are people who have won the lottery 3 times in a row. Okay, first of all. Second of all, they said things like, "Well, anything can happen. We think we could destroy the Earth, but it is possible, but we don't think we will."
Right.
Okay.
That's
Well,
important.
there you go. Yeah.
Nah, probably won't happen.
Probably won't happen. We could create a wormhole and dragons could come out, but we don't think it will. You know, smart aleck comments like that. Okay, look, if you know anything about quantum physics, then you know about something called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And the Heisenberg uncertainty principle basically demonstrated in the lab that on the subatomic quantum level, galaxy behaves as if it is being observed.
Yes.
And it knows it's being observed. And when it's observed, it will give you one result. And when it's not observed, the experiment will give you a totally different result. In other words, even if you think about it while the experiment is running, it will perform the way you expect.
Yep.
When you don't think about it, it will not. This is all confirmed so-called science. But really, this is mysticism, okay?
Yes. Yes.
This is consciousness underlying everything.
Right.
So what this tells us is that reality gives us what we expect. So when you have guys making comments like that, and they're dealing with quantum physics.
And they know, by the way, they're the scientists.
Yes, and they know
much
that,
more than you and I. Mm-hmm.
Yes, they know about, for instance, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
Right.
It's not a good idea to go around making comments about all the funny, ha-ha ways we could destroy the Earth.
They thought that, though.
By actually saying that, in the quantum realm, you can bring it to pass. That's one thing. The second part to this is that they deceive us with what they claim this machine does and how it works. For instance, they're taking 2 proton beams and they're smashing them with super precision together, and they're smashing 2 protons together at nearly the speed of light. Okay. They're not just any protons. They are the heaviest protons they can find, like lead, gold, things like that. Then they'll turn around and tell people, well, you know, these are the same type of collisions that occur in outer space. No, they're not. There aren't lead and gold protons zipping around in interstellar space and striking each other with exact precision. It's just not happening, okay, at the speed of light, okay? In other words, when you have cosmic radiation particles colliding in space, they're going to be glancing off each other. They're going to throw off other particles in all sorts of directions. But it's not the type of controlled, supermassive collision that these guys are doing right here on this planet. Okay? It's totally different. And if strange matter results, or if many black holes do result, which now Stephen Hawking says, oh, guess what? They don't evaporate. After all, I was wrong. Well, if they don't evaporate, then where do they go? Well, I'm going to tell you where they go. Their little containment chamber, their little ring is not going to contain a mini black hole that's subatomic in size, okay? They're going to fall toward the nearest mass of greatest density. That's what they're going to be attracted to. That would be the center of the planet, okay? So all these types of things that they're fooling with, that they could potentially create, and those aren't the only 2 things they could create. Strangeness. They could create something called a dipole quark, which is basically what neutron stars are made out of. And if they created even one of those, it could convert all the matter on the planet into dipole quarks. And basically, the Earth would be shrunk about the size of a golf ball. Okay? So these people know that these risks are possible. They know. They basically have said they know that they could possibly destroy the planet, but we don't think that's going to happen. Okay. They're playing God with our planet. And none of us got to say, hey, we don't want you to do that.
Okay.
Governments are funding this, as a matter of fact.
And the fact that you said, that you pointed out, this one very vital piece of information, is that what you're just you're saying is that when the particles are being observed, they behave one way. Now that's very profound. And the fact that these scientists know that in a much deeper sense than we laymen do, and they continue to just keep saying that and saying that, it leads me to believe that this connects to a much broader picture that involves...
Well, if you look at CERN from the air, at the LHC site, the Large Hadron Collider site, it's shaped like a giant key. Okay. If you open up a wormhole to another part of the universe or to another universe, essentially what you have, and if it's a stable hole, even for a short length of time, what you have basically created is a bottomless pit. Now, I don't want to go all revelation on you or anything here, but the fact of the matter is we're told that there is an angel called Abaddon, or Apollyon, which is the destroyer.
Yes.
And he has the key to the bottomless pit. And at the end of everything, he is allowed to come to this plane of existence and open the bottomless pit and release a bunch of really bad characters into our world.
Right.
So, when you put it all together, and you see that, yes, the CERN site was once the temple of Apollo, where all sorts of sacrificial rites were conducted. When you see Shiva the Destroyer, who is the Hindu equivalent in many ways of Apollo.
Like Horus, yeah.
As the symbolic icon. And then you look at this ring. Well, Shiva is surrounded by a ring of death and regeneration, destruction and regeneration. This whole thing has esoteric implications.
They are aware of that, and it's obviously on purpose.
They obviously are doing this on purpose.
Obviously.
So who is behind it? What's really going on? And why in the world are our governments funding this with billions and billions and billions of dollars?
Well, I mean, they go to the places like a Bohemian Grove and make mock sacrifices to an altar, you know, the Moloch. They, in Saudi Arabia and Iraq, I remember reading when I was in college, it was I don't know how I found it, but it was one of the branches of the military. I can't find it again. They were uncovering something deep buried in the sand to do the express purpose of doing it right.
Yeah, it was supposedly in Iraq. But here's another thing to consider. And this is something I talked to Monica Hanks about back in 2011. The LHC represents, it is the most powerful electromagnetic force, artificial force on Earth. In other words, it's a super electromagnet, okay? And whenever they ramp this thing up to new levels, levels of energy output, energy usage for these high impact, super, just unbelievably powerful collisions. When they do that, they create a magnetic field with the machine that is beyond any magnetic field that we've ever created before. Okay, the first time, maybe not the first time, well, one of the first times they did it, the next day there was a massive earthquake in Chile. And then it broke and they had to shut it down for a while. A couple years later, they crank it back up again to a new high level, and there's a tsunami the next day, and a huge earthquake in Fukushima, Japan. Okay. Then last year, when was the great quake? That was this year, in Nepal, earlier this year. The day before, either a day or two before they did that, before the quake struck, they cranked this machine up to a brand new energy level. Strange avalanches and quakes were felt in the Alps. In fact, a bunch of people died that were there mountain climbing and hiking, and some stuff that was never expected to fall. There was this strange anomalous quake, and all this stuff fell off the mountain and killed these people, okay? Then the next day, or maybe shortly later, like 12, 15 hours later, that massive quake hit Nepal. Now, you can't tell me, tell me that they don't know, because understand this. The Earth has an electromagnetic field. Okay, you take a bunch of magnets and you have them close together, but they're with their opposing poles pushing against each other, say, and they're held in equilibrium. You take another magnet and you drop it in the middle, in the center of those magnets. What happens? They all jump around.
Yeah.
They all jump around, they shift around.
Right.
So every time they turn this machine on and they crank it up to one of these massive levels of electromagnetic force, gravitational force, the planet says, hey, wait a minute, we got to reorder all these magnetic fields that underlie all these tectonic plates.
It's almost as if they're fine-tuning it to see what they can do and accomplish, play around with the next time they go to the next level.
Dr. Otto Rossler, a retired physicist and biochemist from Germany, he actually won the Nobel Prize for biochemistry, I believe it was. You know, he has been warning about this for a long time, and he believes that not only could they create some of the things that I've been talking about, but that they could create a quasar.
Oh, wow.
There are some particles that if they were to fall to the center of the planet, attract to the Earth's center, that it would create a quasar, which would also result. It would result in these. Oh, what a quasar is? It's basically what would be called a white hole.
Mm-hmm.
It's the opposite end of a black hole. Yeah.
It ejects.
It's where the energy comes out.
Yeah, both poles, right?
Yeah. It's where the stuff that goes in as a black hole is ejected as a beam of energy from the other direction, actually in a dipolar manner.
Right.
So, you know, I've seen a lot of stories, and these are legitimate news stories, about mysterious beams of light being seen.
William, Michael Mott, we have to take a short break right now.
Sure.
It's at the 5:55 mark, so here in Illinois, which heralds the time for a break. So please join us when we return. We have a very interesting...
The following program is intended for mature audiences. The views and opinions expressed by the host do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, the network, any other affiliates of this network, or its sponsors. Good day and welcome to the Osborne Cosmic Weather Report. Today is Wednesday, January 6th, 2016, the first episode of the new year. There is new information and a new model behind galaxy formation in the early universe. Previously, astronomers believed that dwarf galaxies were the first such in the universe, and that today's giant spirals and ellipticals formed as a result of galactic collisions and mergers. But it looks like it'll turn out to be a lot more complicated than that, thanks to the discovery of something called submillimetre galaxies and the attempts to model their formation. Submillimetre galaxies are galaxies that emit most of their light in infrared submillimetre wavelength light. They are rare, old, and far away, having only existed in the early universe, less than 3 billion years old. It is now some 14 billion years old by most calculations. But they are a recent discovery. Their copious gas and dust absorbed other wavelengths of light, but radiated in infrared, and only when we could do infrared sky surveys did we discover them. These are evidently the early form of galaxies, and they are rife with star formation that goes on for a very long time. But only recently have astronomers been able to model these galaxies. Previous models that utilized galactic collisions showed brief bursts of star formation that tapered off in only 10 or 20 million years. But this isn't what's observed in submillimetre galaxies. Instead, a team of astronomers, led by Desika Narayanan of Haverford College near Philadelphia, took the modeling in 2 stages. First, the original collapse of matter into a protogalaxy, using large-scale gravitation of dark matter. Second, the effects of stellar winds, blowing gas and dust outward before gravity pulls it back in again. And suddenly they had star formation that went on for almost 1 billion years. So while mergers no doubt occurred, it apparently was stellar winds churning up the gas and dust inside the galaxies that sustained the star formation. Now, we verify the models against real submillimetre galaxies, and one more cosmological puzzle will be explained. There's a lot more galactic dynamics to be modeled, such as supermassive black holes in the cores, but that will come in time. Ceres update. The Dawn spacecraft continues to return data on this large asteroid. According to NASA, the bright spot inside Ocketer crater is far from the only one on Ceres' surface. There are over 130 scattered across the asteroid's surface, and most appear to be inside craters. This is significant. The reflections are consistent with the type of magnesium sulfate salt called hexahydrite, similar to Epsom salt. These deposits would be left behind after sublimation of water ice. It's postulated Ceres has a subsurface layer of briny water ice or slush, uncovered when a meteor punches through the crust to the ice layer. The ice then sublimates, going directly from solid phase to vapor, leaving behind shiny crystalline salt deposits. But Ocketer crater may be a little bit special. It's the brightest of the bright spots. Its features indicate it is a young crater, and the presence of hazes inside it when combined by the Herschel Space Observatory's data indicating water vapor on Ceres, may indicate that water ice sublimation is actively occurring. Add in the fact that this haze is most prominent at local noon and almost non-existent at local sunrise and sunset, and we have a situation not unlike a cometary surface, where solar heating results in ice sublimation, with local dust particles being lifted along with the resulting vapor. Also, there is evidence that some rocks on Ceres contain bound ammonia. Ceres is too warm for ammonia to exist in isolated form. It would evaporate right off the planetoid, but it could remain if chemically bound in minerals. This is an indication that Ceres may not be native to the asteroid belt, but may originally have formed in the outer solar system, drifted in after its original orbit was perturbed, perhaps by a larger body, and then was caught in its current orbit. The Dawn spacecraft has achieved its final orbit around Ceres at an altitude of about 240 miles. It is actively recording data, including images at a resolution of 120 feet or 35 meters per pixel, infrared, gamma ray, and neutron spectra, and high-resolution gravity data. Stay tuned for more exciting discoveries. Solar activity is very low. There are only 2 spot complexes on the solar near side and 2 on the solar far side, for a total of 4 on the entire solar surface. Solar flares have been very minor, with largely B and C classes produced. Spot complex 2743 produced a couple M-class flares, but it has now rotated to the far side. Last week's much ballyhooed CME was underwhelming. While it did generate a K-index value of 6 out of 9, producing nice aurora at high latitudes, the actual impact was rather weak. The aforementioned spot group 2743 popped off another M-class flare on January 2nd with associated coronal mass ejection. However, it was on the solar limb when the flare occurred and is now on the far side. The CME will miss Earth. Coronal hole solar wind streams may result in some minor geomagnetic storming and auroras this week. The Wolf number is 64. Data for this report is taken from Sky and Telescope, Discover Magazine, NASA, the Noaa Space Weather Prediction Center, the Solar Terrestrial Relations Observatory, or STEREO, the Solar Dynamics Observatory,